There's a part of you that still believes joy is dangerous. Because once you smiled too wide and someone told you to quiet down. You danced too freely and they laughed. You cried too loudly and they walked away. That was the day your body made a choice. Better to hide the fire than risk being burned for it. Carl Jung once wrote, "In every adult lurks a child, an eternal child, something that is always becoming, never complete." But I didn't become, I disappeared. Not all at once. Forgetting doesn't feel like a funeral. It feels like adapting. It feels like praise for growing up, when what you really did was learn how to bury your voice with a straight back and a smile. I buried you, little one, not because I stopped loving you, but because it was the only way I knew how to survive. You don't remember the exact moment it happened, but I do. It was the day I traded wonder for approval. The first time I earned a gold star for staying quiet. The afternoon I tucked your drawings behind books I never planned to finish. The night I stared in the mirror and couldn't find your eyes in mine anymore, and yet you stayed. I saw you again last week, not in a dream, but in a child dancing to a song only they could hear. Barefoot, arms wide, completely unafraid of joy. And I cried, not out of envy, but because something in me remembered how that felt. You've never really left. You just stopped raising your voice because I kept talking over you. But now I hear it. You ask nothing from me, only that I sit beside you just once and remember. Remember the swing swaying in dusklight. The crayon that broke from pressing too hard and the laughter that followed. The sandbox that didn't care who you were, only what you could imagine. They told me to grow up and I obeyed by shrinking. They said be strong. And I mistook that for never feeling again. But strength isn't silence. Strength is staying soft in a world that rewards numbness. And you've been soft this whole time. I buried you to survive, but you were never the threat. You were the reason I survived at all. And now I want to remember who we were before the forgetting became a habit. Before my reflection became a stranger. Before I confused performance for peace. You're still drawing, still singing, still here. And I think I'm finally ready to listen. It wasn't violence, it was repetition. The rule book was invisible. But I learned it by heart. Be quiet, be small. Be useful, be good. They didn't have to hurt me. They just had to reward me when I disappeared. I stopped crying because no one asked why I started. I stopped laughing because someone told me it was distracting. I stopped asking questions because someone said I was exhausting. And I thought that was growth. Because they clapped when I swallowed my voice, but you didn't. You watched from the attic of my heart, drawing suns on the walls of my silence. Every time I got praise for being composed, you screamed into the pillow of my gut. Every time I gave the right answer for the wrong reasons, you colored outside the lines in protest. And I ignored you. Because your voice carried everything I had to forget just to stay upright. The day they called me resilient was the day I realized I had confused endurance with worth. They applauded my numbness and called it strength. But no one teaches you how to feel again once the numbness becomes home, except you. You were the ache behind my ambition, the lump in my throat when the room got too quiet, the face I couldn't see in my reflection because it still knew how to cry. I saw you again in a story I almost forgot, a tale of frost and mirrors. In The Snow Queen, a boy named Kai is cursed. A shard of enchanted glass slips into his heart and he forgets how to love, how to laugh, how to see beauty. He disappears into a world of ice. But his friend Gerda, refusing to give up, walks across fire and snow to find him. And when she does, she doesn't lecture him. She doesn't demand he come home. She weeps. And her tears melt the glass in his heart. That's what you were doing, wasn't it? You were Gerda, trekking through the frozen wilderness of my life, waiting for the moment I'd let the tears fall. Not as a breakdown, but as a thaw. Oh, I didn't break, I froze. And you've been holding the match. Rumi said the wound is the place where the light enters you. I used to think my wound was proof of failure. Now I see it's where you've been trying to get in all along. I didn't abandon you to be cruel. I abandoned you because I thought feeling meant falling, but you never fell, you stayed. Drawing warmth in a cold room, waiting not for rescue but for remembrance. And maybe today I finally remember how to come home. It wasn't the mirror that was broken. It was me learning how to disappear in plain sight. I'd look into the glass and see someone who smiled on command, who kept busy enough to drown out the ache, who learned how to function without ever being full. A reflection built on edits, on roles I was applauded for playing. But sometimes, just sometimes, I catch a flicker behind the eyes. A question I didn't let finish. A voice I hadn't heard in years. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And I had mistaken forgetting for healing. I'd called survival purpose. I'd called numbing strength. But the truth is, you never stopped watching me from behind the mirror. From beneath the weight of my accomplishments. From the quiet corners of joy I walked past too fast to feel. You were the one still drawing in the dust. Still waiting for me to realize that I hadn't grown out of you. I'd just grown away. And every time I called myself broken, you handed me a crayon and said, "We're not finished." I used to think the mirror cracked when I failed. But now I know it cracked the moment I stopped telling the truth. Because honesty, real honesty, isn't about spilling secrets. It's about facing the self you've been too tired to acknowledge. I see you now. Not as a memory, but as a presence. You're not smaller than me, you're not my past. You are the part of me that refused to forget how to feel. And maybe that's why it's been so hard to hold joy. Because joy belongs to the parts of us that were never allowed to stay. Chiron, the wounded centaur, was a healer who could save everyone but himself. His pain made him wise. But it wasn't until he surrendered to it that he found peace. That's you, isn't it? The pain I buried, the wisdom I rejected. The part of me I thought I had to silence in order to be strong. But what if true strength isn't holding it together? What if it's breaking and still choosing to stay? I pressed my hand against the mirror, and for the first time you pressed back. Not to pull me in, but to remind me that you never left. You didn't ask for an apology, you never needed one. You just needed me to stop pretending you weren't there. I said your name out loud and something shifted. Like the sound of a door unlocking in a room I forgot was mine. I told you I was sorry, not the kind of sorry that seeks forgiveness, but the kind that comes with no expectation. The kind that's really just grief, finally given a voice. Sorry for calling you weak when you were the one holding the pain. Sorry for trading our joy for safety. Sorry for thinking I could outgrow you instead of growing into you. And you didn't flinch. You just handed me a crayon, the same one I dropped when the world said, "Act your age." And I remembered how to hold it without shame. I used to think the inner child was soft, naive, something to shelter or heal or move past. But now I know you are the architect. The one who built the original home before I abandoned it for approval. And this isn't about going back, it's about returning differently. Because wholeness is not restoration, it's reconstruction. It's meeting the wreckage of yourself with arms wide open. I told myself I couldn't go back to who I was. But maybe the goal was never to go back. Maybe it was to go deeper. To sit with you in the rubble and build something that could hold us both. Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "Go back and take care of yourself." The wounded child in you needs you to acknowledge it. I hear him now, and I hear you. And I hear me, all of us finally speaking the same language again. There's no rescue here, just recognition, no fireworks, just quiet presence. You color, I listen, and in that shared silence I realize I don't need to fix you. I just need to stay. They never told me that healing could look like play. That joy was not childish, but sacred. That the way back to wholeness wasn't through proving I'd grown, but remembering what I never should have abandoned. I thought I'd have to fix myself to explain the scars, to earn the right to be soft again. But you never asked for that. You just sat in the sandbox, crayon in hand, waiting for me to stop performing long enough to sit beside you. And when I finally did, you didn't speak. You just handed me the red one, the one I used to use for dragons and sunsets and fire. I'd forgotten what it meant to create without purpose, to build sandcastles knowing the tide would come, to laugh while it all washed away because the joy was in the making, not the keeping. I remembered Brian Wilson once built a sandbox in his living room and placed a piano in the center of it. He said that's where the music lived. That's what it took to bring his soul back to life. Maybe healing is that strange, that inconvenient, that free. You didn't need me to rescue you. You needed me to stop pretending you were a phase. You are not my before, you are my always. The child I buried wasn't a symbol of innocence. He was the architect of my truth. You never stopped drawing, even when I forgot how to look. Even when I traded color for grayscale and called it maturity. Carl Jung wrote, "The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct, acting from inner necessity." And you are that necessity. I once believed strength meant control, that safety meant silence, that success required sacrifice. But now I see, the truest power comes from presence. The courage to feel everything and keep the door open anyway. We don't go back to being children. We go forward with the child beside us. And in doing so, we finally become real. Like the velveteen rabbit whose edges frayed and stuffing wore thin, not from being perfect, but from being loved. You are my reality. The part of me that stayed soft while I built walls around my own longing. And when I finally put down the bricks, you were still there. Building castles out of nothing but sand and a belief that it mattered. Maybe this isn't restoration, maybe it's resurrection. Maybe the fire that burned everything down was never trying to destroy me, only to clear space for the garden we would plant together. I don't need your apology, I never did. I just needed you to stop pretending I was gone, to stop treating me like a ghost when I've been breathing beside you this whole time. You left me behind not out of hate, but out of fear. And I stayed behind not out of weakness, but because I remembered. I remembered who we were before the masks, before the metrics, before the smile you wore to keep from unraveling. You searched for healing like it was something to earn. But it was always here, in the crayon you stopped holding, in the swing that still creaks in the wind, in the part of you that aches during music you can't explain. You said my name in the dark, and I heard you. I always have. You called me your inner child. But I'm more than a memory, I'm the map. The one who knows where you hid the parts of yourself you were told were too much. The softness you repackaged as sarcasm. The dreams you wrapped in productivity so no one would laugh. But I remember the way we used to dance when no one was watching. The way we trusted the world without asking for permission. The way we cried when it hurt and didn't call that weakness. I'm not your past, I'm your pulse. I'm not here to be saved. I'm the part of you that saves you from disappearing into who they said you had to be. You don't need to fix me. You need to believe me. Believe that you were never broken, only buried. That your joy was never naive, only silenced. Rumi said, the wound is the place where the light enters you. And now I say, you are glowing. Not because you healed perfectly, but because you stopped running from the fire. And now we walk together. No longer child and adult, but one being, tender and whole, wild and wise. This is not the end, this is the reunion. So write this down if you need to. You are allowed to begin again. You are allowed to feel. You are allowed to be the adult who finally stayed. And when you forget, I'll still be here, crayon in hand, Swing set swaying, waiting, because I never left, and now neither will you.